Today, a show that is topical and disturbing.
We're going to look at trust, truth, and change.
Big topics with personal consequences.
Today on Future Forward, I'm Laura Fitton.
I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch.
Great time for my cable to go out. Sorry, I'm on Ethernet, but I'm going to be audio only today. Hi, everybody.
It's probably, A, we've got plenty of things to talk about, and B, I think everyone can imagine your face.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy to be able to have the rage on my face instead of controlling it.
So we talked a little before the pod about the Supreme Court, and I think we need to just start there. And I think it's possible that you and I will have a somewhat different take on it, obviously for all kinds of reasons, including biology, but more than that, politics. So this has been a big part of your week. So why don't you start by talking about where you've ended up?
Yeah. We try not to be too date specific, right? But it is Mother's Day when we're recording this. And I want to frame a lot of what I have to say about the future of Mother's Day, because the current Mother's Day is BS, if I may just come out and say it. First of all, create space. This is a tough day for so many reasons, for so many people. So my Mother's Day message each year is, may you find some unconditional self-love. May you create space for yourself today to give yourself the experience of motherhood that you need. I won't even get into all the reasons it can be a tough day for folks. I just want to leave that space there and send you all love. I also want to say a content warning. This is going to be some rough stuff talked about today. So if that's going to trigger you, this might not be the episode to listen to. And I want to frame, people have been talking about the woman's right to an abortion. The best take I saw about this on Twitter this week, I've been saying people for a long time. And it's not just to be more inclusive of trans and non-binary, which is very, very important, but we erase children. First content warning problem, right? Children, especially children who are raped, children who are abused in any way, are not women. So please, when we discuss this, people, and look, to be gendered about it, we've been begging men to rise up and fight with us, and we are so tired of them ignoring and minimizing us. In the future of Mother's Day, I want to see a world where, women are not working with less pay, more household work, poorer healthcare, severe maternal death in the US compared to the whole rest of the world, and so many other things that we can all improve on. And you can hear it in my voice. I am from a ragged place this week.
So here's the thing. So the New York Times on the Daily had a podcast, has to have been a year ago, maybe longer. I could find it, put it in the show notes, about the history of the anti-abortion movement and how clearly it was discovered as a wedge issue that could be, essentially some very clear political activists many, many years ago figured out that they could activate people with this very emotional and not very logical thing and use it as a weapon. But
Yep.
The outcome is not about women, and it's not about children, and it's not about right to life. None of those when you get down to the people that are organizing this, none of those. I mean, that's the marketing ploy.
Yeah,
but that's not the agenda.
It is so, so, so cynical. And if you doubt that, ask yourself two simple questions, right? Can the forced birth movement, which is what I call it, survive if it simply tells the truth? So much of the dogma thrown out into the world by this particular side of this particular argument is straight out lies. If it was limited to the truth, it would be nowhere near as effective. And I'm going to dip into that in a second. The other piece is we would actually be reducing abortions if the forced birth movement was about reducing abortions. But that movement universally rejects simple things like better health care, better access to birth control. We put dangerous chemicals into the bodies of those who can gestate for 40 years rather than do a simple $25 reversible elective surgery, right? Which would be very, very effective birth control. We saw in Colorado when birth control was free, abortions went right down. So dipping back to that first point, it's not just about controlling people's bodies and their sexuality. It is also about controlling that 53% of white women who vote against their self-interests because they have been lied to and they have been sold a bill of goods about babies dying, and they love babies. And it is a way to control those people too. And that's it. That is the goal.
And so now let me talk about how angry I am at the Democrats and the progressives and the liberals and whatever label you choose. None of this is a surprise. Like, you could have marked your calendar the day that the Supreme Court balance shifted. June is when the decisions come out. This decision wasn't going to come out in August. It wasn't going to come out in May. It was coming out. So the fact that it got leaked, 4 weeks early and has therefore become a news story, notwithstanding, what upsets me is, and again, I am not a political scholar, so someone wants to jump in the chat and tell me what an idiot I am, today would be the day to do it, because you wouldn't be the first in the last 48 hours. But what I don't understand is, the Democrats for another 5 months, 4 months, have some ability to change the makeup of the Supreme Court. I don't understand it, but that seems to be a non-starter. I don't know why. And, and then you've got the filibuster, which isn't even a law. It's a practice or a policy, which the Democrats, for all, if we change it, then they'll get control and then they'll change it. Like, are we not paying attention to this train running down the tracks? Because I can make a list of all the things that will happen after the Supreme Court ruling, and they are absolutely, completely, and unambiguously, likely.
Yeah.
So
they're horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's not
a tool of white supremacy, by the way.
I mean, does anybody believe that gay marriage survives in the Supreme Court? Of course it doesn't. Does anyone believe that LGBTQ rights survive in the Supreme Court? Of course it doesn't. Does anyone believe that the right to buy or sell contraceptives of any kind survives in the Supreme Court? Maybe that'll be a little, maybe guys not being able to buy condoms in the drugstore will be, maybe they'll tell Amazon you can't ship them. Maybe they'll become, an item that needs a doctor's signature, which would be.
These guys love condoms so much to begin with.
Well, but all I'm saying is, like there's a whole series of things that are absolutely and unambiguously going to happen. And so I do not understand. And it goes back to, I'm a marketing guy in my DNA. The problem with with anybody allowing this branding to exist, right? Calling it the right to life movement, is it makes me an anti-life advocate. Well, that's, I'm not an anti-life. So
the people espousing it are, look what they did on masks, look what they did on COVID, look what they do on vaccines. I mean, they are not look what they do on guns. It is not a group of people that want life to exist. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off the rails.
No, not at all. Death penalty. How can you be?
The question you're asking about why aren't Democrats doing this in Congress? I feel that rage too, but look at all the really well-supported, publicly popular policies they are not able to get through because there are literal wolves in Congress right now undermining everything, even on the Democratic side. And
Um,
that
I,
stalemate is so real.
so
So
I
yeah,
think
we've seen this coming, but we've seen climate change coming for 30, 40 years, right? People are not going to wake up until the wolf is at the door. Um, it's a fascinating week to me watching the right try and make the story about the leak. And, many on the left try and echo the horror we've been screaming about for years and been ignored about. And, I think it's very interesting that when the story is about the leak, there are equally valid cases made for the leak came from the left versus the leak came from the right.
I
I think
think
that's
I think
fascinating
I
too.
think I think it's way more entertaining a story.
Yeah.
There's an invisible person, and
Well, and
there's a
it
wider.
shuts down the other story. It's an
It
effective
shuts.
way of shutting up the people who are our literal human rights are affected by this.
So there was an episode of West Wing that is etched in my brain, and it's called Slow News Day. And Allison Janney is the press secretary, and she
Yep.
basically says, "Look, we have to feed the press a story every day because they have to print a paper every day. And so if we don't feed them a story every day, they will go look for one." And I think the Republicans get a lot of credit. I mean, the minute this leak went out there, like we got to get ahead of this. That's the story. And then they send out talking points, and everybody lines up and they deliver the talking points with absolute precision. And it's very fucking smart. And we do
Yep.
nothing like that.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, and the media is to blame. I mean, the media, if there is a thing called the media, but
right.
certainly
They're complicit.
you know, you know, the right to life movement is a talking point, and newsrooms could say, you know what, we don't feel the need to use that word because we don't think it reflects accurately what that movement is. And we could call it the anti-choice movement or the anti-women's rights movement or the anti-women's rights to their own body, but we could just as easily call it something else. And it's not like the Democrats don't have a slew of creative marketers in their midst. So just like we've been beaten badly on to the point where I'm a pretty good marketer and I don't have a better idea for how to fix it, but it should be fixed today. And the new, whatever the definition of right versus left, should be branded clearly and should be messaged clearly and not squabbled over. And I do not understand why the filibuster. I just don't. I mean, again, I'm going to get yelled at for this, right? But I don't understand. Biden has in his toolbox some very effective weapons. They're very dangerous. They're big, scary weapons, but he's not going to use them. He's not going to use them. And it's hard to imagine how much worse things could be when we get to a place where we don't have Congress anymore. But it seems like that's where it's headed.
Yeah, I mean, there's some hope that this will reveal the full horror of the right and moderate voters will not give them the Congress. But there's a lot going on, a lot of levels to, even my local town here in liberal Massachusetts, Republicans have made surprising gains in our most recent election. But
so I want to talk about the Ministry of Truth, because I think it's a really interesting story, and I think it fits right into what you want to talk about, which is the definition of actual facts about birth control and about abortion.
Okay, but can I pause right there? Because Ministry of Truth is such a cynical way to refer to this. And you just out of the other side of your mouth said, why isn't Biden using stronger tools? Right? We are a nation at war over truth. We have had lies piped into all of our media for probably decades, right? But very, very noticeably for the last 6 years on Facebook and on Twitter. It is a huge international security issue, right? And so the government tries to do something about it, and there's this immediate cynical, oh, the Ministry of Truth. Like, okay, do you want big new creative tools, or do you want to be cynical and angry about everything? and I should, that's me projecting, because I am right now cynical and angry about everything. Right? Like, which is it?
So I guess.
I mean, this is a very scary. He's evoking totalitarianism, the Truth Squad. Look out! Like, yeah, we should defend against weaponized lies, because weaponized lies are what's tearing us apart right now.
So I'm in a course at NYU, and I'm studying, among other things, misinformation. And so the professor asked us all to write a paper about a place in the world or a country in which effective management of misinformation as a policy is working. And it was a good assignment, and I spent a whole lot of time researching it. And it turned out it was hard to find. But the place that has been facing most aggressively and with a whole series of policies and procedures is Finland.
Okay.
And guess what tool they use as the most aggressive tool against misinformation?
I don't know.
Education.
Yes.
Starting in the elementary schools, and with absolute precision, teaching young people to understand how to read and what to read, and sourcing, and being able to. It's a countrywide initiative, and it goes all the way up through high school, and it's incredibly effective. They're and it made me smile and cry at the same time, because what's the likelihood in a country where we're fighting over banning books and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence, right? Education being locally determined is a highly, highly regressive policy that has been the norm in our country for a very long time. And it allows whole swaths of the population to be raised in profound untruth and ignorance. And yeah, it is highly weaponized. Again, even in our more progressive areas where there is a genuine effort to find the truth and make education not politically motivated, just the fact that the wealthiest towns can afford the best education programs and the poorest towns can afford the least, and how much you pay for a house or pay for rent is directly tied to your educational access. I mean, we could nationalize education, and it has been fought against tooth and nail. And currently, regressives are taking that fight explicitly to the school boards nationwide. And that has deeply racist roots, that has other deeply complicated cultural roots. And I think it is not coincidental to disinformation being used as a national weapon. I think it's directly related.
I guess. So let's talk about misinformation and women's rights, because I think that's where we started, and I think that's core to this week we just had.
Yeah.
And
let us start thinking about them as human rights. Let us stop thinking about women as the parents. There are parents of many genders. Let us stop thinking about, I don't know. Sorry. I'll let you go with what you wanted to say there.
Yeah, no. I think look, I think there's some structural inequities here that we don't think much about, which is, like, I just don't understand how what women do with their bodies gets voted on and turned into law by men.
Well, what people
I just
do
don't
with their
understand.
bodies. What people do with their bodies.
Well, but I said I didn't make that distinction lightly. I mean, The number of people that are anti-abortion and pro-death penalty, I just don't know how you square that circle. I just don't understand. I like little innocent lives, but bad adult lives that have been damaged by abuse or neglect or alcoholism or whatever. Those lives I'm happy to take. I just don't understand.
Yeah, it's not about life. It's about controlling those that have been historically marginalized and keeping that control. There's a lot of really complicated stuff we could get into about, again, trigger warning, sexual assault and rape, child marriage, domestic violence. Abortion is healthcare. There are many, many reasons to really illustrate the point. I had a chicken almost die this week of an egg getting stuck, right? Healthcare for reproductive issues is a life or death matter. And by the way, what is the number one cause of death for a woman who is pregnant or a person who is pregnant or has been within the last 42 weeks? Do you know offhand?
I do not.
It's murder. And usually by their partner.
That's disturbing.
It is very disturbing. So how we handle parenting, how we handle housekeeping, that people who can reproduce get worse healthcare, get lower pay, bear higher costs of living. The future of Mother's Day I want to see is a space where we are all giving ourselves that unconditional love I invoked in the beginning. We are all parenting ourselves through what is hard in life because we all need each other and we need community support for one another to get through that stuff, and equal human rights for all people. Equal human rights on pay, equal human rights on housework, equal human rights on parenting, equal human rights on healthcare, equal human rights on cost of living. That is the day I want to see in the future. And we can get there, but we've got to stop accepting so much lying and manipulation.
So I talked to a friend of mine on Friday, big time advocate, was very focused on the midterms, pulled out all the stop, raised a lot of money, very wealthy guy. And I said to him, what are you going to do coming up? And he just sighed and he said, I'm so tired. And this is a very well-known, very powerful, very impressive guy. And I just heard in his voice, we seem to have we seem to have not enough rage, which, rage is exhausting. I mean, rage,
rage is exhausting. We need hope and we need focus. And that's why I want to paint this, future of Mother's Day vision for all those things I just listed, for equal human rights. The thing I did, and I am going to go to the gendered thing, even though abortion is inclusive of many genders. The moment RBG died, my Facebook feed exploded in two directions. And all the typically male people were talking about their podcast this week. And all the typically female people were literally screaming, all caps, curses, the word no with more O's than you could imagine. It was a stark contrast because, we are living in bodies where we do viscerally know what is at stake and we can't separate ourselves from that. And I took that horror and that grief and my knowledge that I knew nothing about electoral politics, but my knowledge that we had to win the Senate at all costs because we had just lost the entire judicial branch for the foreseeable future. And I turned my energy to voting rights. And most voting rights work is led by Black women because they have suffered the most for having their voting rights violated, and they have always had to organize. And when you step back and look, that is about as bipartisan as it gets, right? The women who run vote.org, the women who run the election hotline, all happen to be Black women. So I spent the rest of my time until January that year just trying to direct all the influential people I knew to tweet about the work, to fund the work, to support the work, to look for the people who are in the trenches doing the work and supporting them. And again, voting rights should be the most bipartisan issue we have going. What does it say about our culture that we have a quote unquote side that is trying to reduce voting rights and a quote unquote side that is trying to increase them? May we all row in the direction, no pun intended, of increasing voting rights for all. And the most effective way I saw to focus that rage and that grief that I had in that moment and still have now is continue supporting Black women fighting for voting rights. It is the best thing I can think to keep trying to do.
I think we should stop there because it was eloquent and positive. And while this week has been a hard week, next week has no potential to be an easier week. And so with all of the complexity of flowers and various other, marketing, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week, hopefully with some more cheerful news.
Take care, everyone. Give yourself that unconditional self-love that is your birthright.
All right.